dokie. Okay. I'm going to get started in just a couple minutes. I'm going to make sure I pulled this up. Can everyone see that? And just let me know in the chat. Great. Thank you. Very good. So I'm going to give it like another minute or two just to give people a chance to get settled and logged in. We have, looks like 25 people joining us this morning. Good morning, April. In the meantime, if you would like to put your name and agency in the chat, you're welcome to do so. You know, that's a good way to just kind of network and talk to each other during the session. All right. Thanks, Millie. I see a question here from Blake. Yeah, so she needs to register for our email list to get notices of upcoming trainings, but just keep in mind, we only offer this twice a year at this point. We are in the process of working towards having this be more of like a learn as you go session where we have it recorded and folks can log in and then view a PowerPoint presentation and take the quiz, but she needs to make sure that she is aware that this is not offered very often. So need to make sure that she can attend. All right. Looks like we have a good diverse group today, which is great. Sounds good, Blake. All righty. And just as a reminder to everyone logging in, we will offer this a second time this year. So I am anticipating, I haven't released those dates quite yet, but I'm anticipating it will be sometime in the fall. So just, I will, at the end of the presentation, put in the chat a link to sign up for our mailing list so you get the constant contact notices of when we offer this training. That's going to be your best way to stay up to date of, you know, as to when it is available. All right, so Christina, you ready? Go ahead and get started.
I am.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know it's a Monday and Mondays can be a little bit tough, so we appreciate it. This is the Maryland Partnership for Affordable Housing, our Tenant Training 101 series. We are on a bit of an asynchronous schedule for this particular series. For the second one that we offer later in the year, I'm going to have a more consistent schedule. It was simply because I wanted to make sure we had 2 offerings this year. So this series is essentially going to go over both the Maryland Partnership for Affordable Housing program. So like a whole list of like explaining specifically what housing programs our agencies oversee collectively with the Department of Health and the Department of Housing and Community Development. But in addition, we're going to go through some information that when you have a tenant who is moving into a new unit, regardless of what program they're accessing, there are specific things that as a case manager, housing support services worker, supports planner, you're going to want to make sure that you go over with the tenant as part of that move-in process. We all know that when you move into a new apartment, there's all kinds of rules, there's all kinds of information that is extremely beneficial for a tenant to be informed of up front. And of course, these programs all have different types of leases, information, the community rules, all very important for a tenant to be informed of upfront. So today's session is just an overview of Tenant Training 101. And we'll talk a little bit about the structure of this training and what to expect. Our next session for this particular series is actually going to be on Monday, the 8th, May 8th, from 10 to 11:30. That session will go over understanding a lease and community rules. And then the following session is going to be actually on Wednesday, the 10th of May. That's also 10 to 11:30. And it will be talking more about reasonable accommodations and fair housing issues. So that's another one. And our final session in the series is going to be on the 15th. That's a Monday. That one is only from 10 to 11 a.m. And that particular session is going to go over staying safe in your home. It will talk about a little bit more detail into emergency preparedness issues and how to help tenants with having an emergency preparedness plan, and also ensuring that they are able to access services safely in the event of an emergency. So that is kind of how we will be approaching this session. Just as an FYI for folks who are joining, the chat is the best place to put general technical assistance questions. The Q&A is where I would like for folks to put in their questions specifically about the presentation. And what I'll do is at the end of the session, Christina and I will look through those questions and try to either, if there's some that we want to answer live, we'll go ahead and do that. Some we might be able to answer right there in the Q&A during the session. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started here. So here are our series speakers. Actually, we do have an update. DRM, Disability Rights Maryland, I believe Leslie Dickinson's will be doing that presentation for us. But from the Department of Disabilities, we have Christina Bulliard and myself, Chelsea Heyman, and Penny Scrivens as well will be giving the presentation. From the Coordinating Center, Renita Broadwater and Denise Lopez will be presenting on emergency preparedness. Again, that session is on Monday, May 15th. And then Disability Rights Maryland will be presenting on the 10th, which is a Wednesday, and that one is from 10 to 11:30. So I will advance my slide here. Okay. So this is the process of both obtaining and maintaining a certification to conduct tenant training. For new trainers, there is a 4-part Train the Trainer webinar series. This is part number 1. And essentially, after you have completed that series, you will have to complete a actual tenant training with a person that you have who is leasing up a unit. MDOD has a couple people that can shadow you while you complete the training. We could do that both in person or virtually, whichever is easiest for you. And as part of that process, once we've shadowed you and just making sure you're going through all of the necessary information with the tenant, you will receive your certificate of completion after that shadowing, just to make sure that you're good to go. You're covering all the information on things like utility allowances, what is in the lease, things like that with the tenant that you're working with. From that point in time, once you have that certificate of completion, you are able to use that, conduct tenant training independently. So you won't need us to assist or intervene. Of course, you should always contact us if you have questions, if anything comes up in the process. If there are concerns during the shadowing, we might request that we do a second shadowing session just to make sure you understand all of the core materials. We try to do some, trying to put in some compliance in the program by doing annual reviews of just, how things are going in terms of tenant training. And again, as I've said, I encourage folks to check in with us if you have any questions during the process of working with a new resident. All right. So the purpose of tenant training is that you're providing residents with the tools needed to live independently and enjoy features of their apartment community. Tenant training is really critical, especially with working with people with disabilities who are transitioning out of institutional settings, because living in your own apartment is very different than living in a nursing facility. So when you're working with somebody and trying to get them more accustomed to what it's like to live in an affordable community in a neighborhood of their choice, we want to make sure that we're going through as much information as we can. So that's going to be things like, again, as I mentioned, setting up their accounts with their utility accounts, receiving things like a utility allowance if they do receive it, and or things like identifying transportation, local resources, how to make a budget and balance a budget. All of these things are very important to set up people for success. And if they don't receive this kind of assistance, it really does do a disservice to individuals because they're not really given a great orientation to a new location. So it's something we do as part of all of our housing programs to just get people comfortable with their new apartment community. All right, true or false? To be able to conduct tenant training independently, case managers only need to attend today's workshop once. So folks, if you could put your answer in the chat, I will take a look and see what people are saying. False, false. Looks like a lot of falses. All right, you are all correct. So as I mentioned previously, this is the first part in a 4-part training, plus you need to do the shadowing. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so here's just a description of tenant training. Typically this occurs in the form of a one-time appointment that you conduct with a new resident. It's usually about a month after the person has moved in, but this is flexible depending on the person. Some folks might want to meet sooner, and that's okay. Normally this is done in person, virtually, or over the phone. Of course, pre-pandemic, this was done exclusively in person. But post-pandemic, we have individuals who simply prefer virtual or phone options. I do think it is nice to do it in person simply because you're going to catch things like, if the person's looking at their lease and they have specific questions, or if they don't have a copy of their lease. These are the things that when you meet with somebody initially, you can help with resolving, because you can explain to them that, they're going to the property management office and getting a copy is an essential thing to do. They want to make sure that they have all of that information laid out and ready to go in case something happens. The key thing that tenant trainers do is review the terms and conditions of the lease, community rules and lease violations. Things like apartment cleaning and basic maintenance, that could even be like cleaning a toilet, cleaning an oven, or using a self-cleaning oven, I should say, because all of these units have self-cleaning ovens. And also understanding the process of requesting an accommodation or modification to a unit. So typically this is done through a letter, or it can also be requested verbally. But we'll actually go into more detail about that at the session that we have on reasonable accommodations and modifications as part of this overall series. Okay. All right, so this is just kind of an overview of who can train a case manager, supports planner, or housing support services worker, MDOD staff and MDH staff. And then we have some authorized representatives from some different case management agencies listed here, of course, as well. That's the Coordinating Center, Image Center, and Independence Now. Why is tenant training important? So one thing just to keep in mind is that a HUD housing lease is certainly very different than a lease you might receive to rent an apartment in the community at a market rate building. We want to make sure that the property manager is calculating rent correctly. There could be, errors with that, particularly if the property manager is new to their job. So it is a form of, checking and ensuring compliance with that. We also want to make sure that the individual knows how to request an accommodation or a modification to their unit. Say somebody is visually impaired and they need special buttons or different kinds of indicators on maybe their oven or microwave. When you actually conduct tenant training with someone, and I've had this experience, you're able to identify these accommodations or modifications that are needed and work with the person on making sure that they get that submitted to the property manager. Really, the big part of it is, it's preventing eviction and possible loss of housing. So oftentimes when somebody is transitioning into the community, it's possible that they don't have sufficient supports or resources in the surrounding area. This is why it's very important to explain, if somebody needs access to, say, like a mental health care facility, a new one for where they're moving, or if they need access to basic health amenities, things like that. It can be very jarring for an individual to be disconnected from their health care. Say they were in a nursing facility or some institutional setting, they need to get connected to services in the community. If they don't get that connection, then it's possible that they could receive lease violations due to behavior. And this is really important to, make that connection, help the person through that process, because that way they're able to live independently without any issues and really make that transition and solidify it. Also allows a tenant to report an opportunity to report any possible concerns about the community. So say a tenant has issues with either contacting the property manager or working with the property manager. This is the chance for you to have that discussion with the client or consumer that you're working with. And it is very, very beneficial to get some of those issues aired out up front and try to talk someone through like what those concerns are and how you can help be like a mediator in that process. It also really helps case managers as well, because you have a better sense of new community resource needs that have emerged. It is a good chance to review things like, what kinds of food access services are in the area. Has there been a change in the transportation offerings in that area? So it benefits you as well. I just want to, kind of drive that home, because resources are always changing, and it's important to stay updated on what's out there and what might not be out there anymore. All right, here's another poll. Yes or no? You are conducting a tenant training at the new apartment of your client who is transitioning out of a residential rehabilitation program, or RRP, licensed by the Behavioral Health Administration. Your client has asked for your assistance with identifying the bus lines in the surrounding area so they're able to attend their therapy appointments. Is this something you should cover in tenant training? I'll just kind of take a look at the chat here. Yes. Seeing many yeses, and I would agree 100%. Again, as I mentioned, this is setting up folks for success. And that's the big reason why we do tenant training. All right, just an overview here of housing programs. This will give everyone who might be new to subsidized housing programs a bit of an overview. So really there are two types of housing programs, tenant-based housing programs and project-based. In tenant-based housing programs, a tenant identifies their own housing, usually is paying about 30% of total household a monthly adjusted gross income to rent and utilities. This is consistent with project-based programs. This is something that the two have in common. Eligible applicants are individuals or families who have an annual income of 50% or less than the AMI or area median income. This is something that is a little bit different than project-based. So within the tenant-based housing programs, MDOD oversees and works with MDH and the Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD, on the MFP Bridge Subsidy Program, which is a tenant-based program, and the DDA Rent Subsidy Program, also, again, a tenant-based program. Project-based housing programs are different. The subsidy is attached to a specific unit within an improved project. Usually these are low-income housing tax credit buildings throughout the state. And again, as I mentioned, the tenant's paying 30% of their total household monthly adjusted gross income. Eligible applicants are individuals or families who have incomes not exceeding 30% of the area median income. Again, this is, a little bit different than tenant-based housing programs. This is going to include the HUD Section 811 Project Rental Assistance Program and the Weinberg Apartments Program. These programs are project-based. They are not tenant-based. So an individual who is being offered a unit in either of these programs cannot take the subsidy to another building. They are not permitted to transfer to another building. Again, if someone is making a transfer, we'll talk about this later, but if someone is requesting a transfer, it has to be related to the disability through a reasonable accommodation process. So it is very different than a tenant-based program. There are advantages and disadvantages to both, as you might imagine. Of course, with the project-based programs, moving is not permitted, but with tenant-based programs, there is flexibility to identifying a unit. However, there's an inspection process that has to happen. There is certain requirements that the unit must meet within housing affordability standards. And, happy to go through that in more detail in subsequent presentations. Okay, so I'll first go over the HUD 811 program. The Maryland Partnership for Affordable Housing applied and received 3 grants for the HUD 811 program in federal fiscal years 12, 13, and 19. Overall, our goal is to identify 400 permanent supportive housing units. We have 322 identified thus far. Again, this is project-based rental assistance, and it is located in multifamily housing developed with DHCD affordable housing financing. The key about this program is that it is integrated. No more than 25% of units designated for people with disabilities. This is going to be a standard across any 811 program nationwide. It is something that we really drive home as an important feature of the program, because we want to ensure that individuals are being offered opportunities to live in the community that are not mimicking an institutional setting and that are compliant based on the Olmstead Act. Eligible applicants are age 18 to 62. They have to meet the HUD definition of disability, which is on the HUD website. I can provide a link to that in the chat later. They also do have to be Maryland Medicaid recipients. So we actually will go through the process of verifying their Medicaid number. So we want to make sure that, when you're entering in an application, you're entering in the correct Medicaid number, so we're able to verify that. They do have to be eligible for long-term supports and services. This could include some of the Medicaid waiver programs like the Community Options Waiver or Community First Choice. It could also include services from a Center for Independent Living as well. And in addition to that, it could be individuals who are transitioning out of residential rehabilitation programs licensed by the BHA. Again, their income has to be at or below 30% of the area median income. And their contribution is 30% of their income for the combined rent and utilities. Here's some of the priority populations. I just want to make sure that anyone attending here knows what our priority groups are. When we go through the wait list and determine eligible applicants for a unit, the wait list automatically sorts based on these categories, as well as the time and date stamp of when the person entered an application, or when the case manager entered an application in the wait list. So our first priority population are individuals who are institutionalized Medicaid recipients. Second priority here, we have individuals at risk of institutionalization due to their current housing situation. So this could be individuals living in substandard housing. Our third priority group are individuals moving to independent renting. So that's going to be those who receive the DDA Community Pathways waiver, brain injury waiver, assisted living unit, BHA's residential rehabilitation program, as I mentioned previously. And our fourth priority group are individuals experiencing homelessness who are Medicaid recipients. We have an order that we go in based on that information. Okay, this slide got a little bit wonky here, but the main point that this slide's trying to convey is that our first grant that we received, there was kind of a breakdown based on the metropolitan statistical areas. So we were really only serving Baltimore and Washington. You can see here the listing of the counties that's for the first grant, first 811 grant. The second and third awards that we received were both statewide. The third award, there is a little bit of a breakdown based on location, but serving statewide, ensuring that we're covering all of the counties in Maryland. We do not have units in every single county in the state. That's, one day, hopefully we can get to that point. However, I do want to mention that if you're interested in getting updates on what units we are leasing, what buildings we're leasing, the best way to get that information is to attend the Maryland Partnership for Affordable Housing case management peer-to-peer calls, and Christina can give information about that in the chat later on. Okay, so the Weinberg Apartments program, this program actually predates our 811 grants. It started in 2011. One of the key things I just want to point out, the 811 program serves individuals who are from 0 to 30% of the area median. Weinberg does not. Weinberg serves individuals 10 to 30% of the AMI. That's for the last two grants we've received. The first grant serves individuals 15 to 30% of the area median income. So that's just a key distinction I want to make sure everyone is aware of. Of course, when we sort individuals on our wait list, as long as the income information is up to date and entered correctly, we can determine eligibility for these different programs based on whenever we're looking through the list of eligible individuals and the counties that they indicate they want to live in. The wait list automatically will do a sort based on income and information. In 2020, the foundation awarded an additional $3 million of funding, and that was intended for the development of some additional affordable rental units. One thing I want to point out, and I'll talk about this in a subsequent slide, is that the priority groupings for this third grant we received is different than the first two. Excuse me. So again, eligibility very similar to 811 in terms of the age served as well as the criminal background requirements. The one of the key differences is the individual has to be receiving SSI and or an SSDI cash payment. So that is required. They have to have that information in there. One of the requirements, this is a federal requirement, so it also applies to 811 as well. The individual cannot have a lifetime sex offense registry indication on their records, and they also cannot have been convicted of producing methamphetamine on federally assisted property. So those are two federal requirements that are going to apply to both 811 and Weinberg. Okay, so this goes through some of our unit identification process. This is applicable to, you know, how we prioritize applicants for the Weinberg Apartments program. You can see here that we consider a number of different eligibility considerations, and the unit selection process, just to, you know, kind of touch upon this. Specifically to Weinberg, the development has to have financing through DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and they have to have nonprofit involvement. So what that means is the developer themselves must have some kind of either partnership with a nonprofit affordable housing developer or be an nonprofit affordable housing developer themselves. Okay, as I mentioned, the Weinberg 3 grant, a little bit of a different priority grouping. So as you can see here, the priority groups are individuals transitioning, specifically transitioning youth with intellectual and developmental disabilities between 18 to 35, who are living with aging caregivers in a group home setting or transitioning from permanent supportive housing. Additionally, we prioritize individuals experiencing homelessness and youth aging out of foster care who are disabled and homeless or at risk of homelessness. So this is exactly the priority grouping that we use for this grant. Again, it's a little different than the first two, but when we are leasing up units that are associated with this grant, we can pull out specifically those who meet this criteria and lease up accordingly. All right, so MFP Bridge Subsidy. This program serves individuals who are 18 years of age and older. So the age requirements are a little bit different. The household income has to be $19,000 or less. They have to be transitioning from institutional settings to independent renting. We expanded this actually in 2020 to also include those who are in the DDA and community options waivers, living in assisted living facilities or group homes. And they have to meet the requirements of the local public housing authority and housing choice voucher program. The reason why this is because this program specifically serves individuals who are coming out of these different types of settings, and they transition. It's a 3-year transition process. They are on the subsidy for 3 years. After 3 years, they are offered a housing choice voucher or some kind of project-based housing in the participating jurisdiction. For the Community Choice Homes program, individuals in Montgomery County who are in MFP Bridge transition to Community Choice Homes, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Supports planners help individuals with applying for the program, looking for housing and supplying documentation to the PHA, Public Housing Authority, and the landlord. So again, it's a little bit of a different program than the first two I talked about. So just something to think about. And it is, the referrals are made internally from the Department of Health. We work with them on actually leasing up these slots. I believe somebody raised a hand. I don't know if I can get to your question after I get through some of these slides here. All right, so these are the participating jurisdictions for MFP bridge subsidy. Christina, I believe, is this slide up to date? I know we had some changes recently with available slots. Oh, you're muted.
Oops, I meant to hit unmute. For the most part, these are up to date. We are waiting for a signed MOU to be updated so that we can continue the program. And we're still waiting for Anne Arundel to get us an update on slots. But the ones that are bold, Easton, Hagerstown, Hartford, St. Mary's, there are still some availability in those jurisdictions. But until we get that new MOU signed, it's going to be a little while before we know about the other jurisdictions.
Yeah. So just for context, for those of you who are new, this is an older program. So the MOUs, you know, that we had with public housing authorities to conduct this program are since expired. So we're in that process of getting those updated. You can see here that it is more so our rural counties where we do not have enough referrals. So if you know individuals who live in some of those counties that Christina just mentioned, please let us know. We're able to work with the Department of Health. Again, the referrals are internal. This is more of a closed system as opposed to the others that I mentioned just now. But regardless, it is something we're trying to lease up these remaining slots in the more rural areas. Okay, so the Community Choice Homes program, this is also a project-based rental assistance program. I briefly mentioned this. It is exclusive to Montgomery County, and it is a partnership that we have with our housing authority. The program provides 30 HOC or Housing Opportunities Commission owned rental units for people with disabilities for a period of 15 years. Similar to the other programs, participants pay 30% of their monthly household adjusted income for rent utilities while living in a CCH unit. The referrals we have for this program, we pull from our Weinberg apartment wait list, which is quite extensive, but there are certain county preferences that are part of this program. They have to not only have an interest in living in Montgomery County, but they have to have an address at the time of referral. And they also have to meet, of course, eligibility, income, and referral criteria. There are certain requirements around individuals who previously lived in the county. So those who became institutionalized after previously living in the county may be eligible, as well as individuals who have worked in the county previously. So whenever we do that kind of check of our wait list, we have a filter in which we filter out individuals who would be eligible, and we're only reaching out and contacting eligible applicants for this program. All right, so here's a little bit more information. One of the most important things about this program is that participants do have to enroll in the HOC Housing Path waitlist, and they also have to maintain the enrollment requirements. HOC does all of the eligibility verification, including income and criminal background. A big thing that I want to make sure people are aware of, the leases for this program look different. They are not the same as what we use for 811 or Weinberg. So that is something to keep in mind. Some of the program requirements are different. They have specific criteria that, again, like criminal background checks could be different depending on the property. That's something to keep in mind. So this is a program that we're really working with the county, but we also ensure that we're meeting the county's requirements to actually lease up these units. Okay, some more information on eligibility requirements here. They do have to have, again, similar to Weinberg, a cash payment from either SSI or SSDI at the time of initial eligibility determination. Again, living or working in Montgomery County at the time of referral, or lived and work in Montgomery County within 5 years of referral, and currently living outside of the county in an institution or group living setting. So that is the residency requirements that this program has. As you see here, very similar to the other programs, the lifetime sex offense registry requirement or conviction of producing methamphetamine, that is consistent in this program. They cannot have those as part of their background. And there is encouragement that folks participate in long-term support services. It's not a requirement of tenancy, as it's not a requirement for tenancy for our other programs either, but it is something that is strongly encouraged. Okay, so the DDA rent subsidy program, this is a new program. So I'm just gonna kind of go through here some of the eligibility and an overview. The program serves adults who are 18 years of age and older. They do have to have a household income. This is 50% of the area median in the county where the housing will be located. They do have to receive at least one DDA service, or they have to be on the wait list for services in the crisis resolution category and not currently housed with a rent subsidy from another public source or reside in public housing. All right, so this goes through the eligibility and prioritization groups here. So in the following order, this is how individuals are prioritized. They are either currently receiving state funds from the DDA for rent, they are homeless or at risk of homelessness, and you can see here there's an order listed as well. Transitioning from a long-term care facility or institution, living with a caregiver who is age 55 or older and who is not able to care for them any longer, transitioning from a group home, shared living, or foster care, and all other eligible applicants. So those are individuals 18 years of age and participating in one of the DDA waiver programs with a housing support goal. So the individuals making referrals to this program are housing support services workers. The person who is referred, and this is something that I just want to make sure that individuals are aware of, is that they do have to have some kind of housing support goal as part of this process. Currently right now, you can check out more information on the program at the link that's listed in the slide here. I can put this in the chat as well. And we will be opening, the waitlist for this program is open currently. We have not started referrals quite yet, but that should be happening shortly. So once Christina starts leasing up these slots, we're going to have individuals who are working with their housing support services worker to identify housing in the community, and it does have to meet certain criteria. So that's part of the process. So stay tuned for that. That should be getting started shortly. All right, Christina, my own front door.
My own front door. So for individuals who are new to this training or new to housing someone with the programs, we have this manual called My Own Front Door. And there's a link in our PowerPoint for you to go online that you can print out copies. It's a great tool for starting the process of talking with your client to go over housing from the very beginning. I have to see what hold on 1 second, I gotta remember what's on the slides.
If you want me to advance, I can certainly do that.
No, not just yet. So if you have a chance to go through and take a look at that link for that manual, it has budgeting tools. It has questions to ask about the home that your client's looking to reside in, where they want to live, the cost for moving, reasonable accommodations, making, sure that the unit's accessible and meet your needs. Is it the neighborhood you want to live in? So it's a lot of tools from when someone wants to start the process of talking about housing to actually moving out. There's lots of resources in there about fair housing. There's information about filing complaints about fair housing and who to contact. There's information about other housing types of programs, and there's definitions and things like that. It's just a really good resource. So if you have a chance, if you haven't already seen this book, to go online, check it out, share it with your clients, share it with all your clients that have housing goals, because there's a lot of good information in there. Okay, next slide. We also have a case manager manual. And that's also online, but we have a lot of those. So if you're looking for a hard copy, just let us know. We can get you a couple. Those we definitely have. This was created very early on, before the wait list was even started. So we're probably looking maybe 2012, 2013-ish. Lots of information about being a case manager and the services and what tenant training is, and again, information about programs and different types of housing. So if you're interested in one of those, it's online if you want to thumb through it. But if you would like a hard copy, let us know. We can get you one of those too. Next slide. Oh, there's more information about it's divided into 4 sections. Program overview about the Section 811 program, case management, and the 811 program, how to apply, and then housing retention. So again, take a look. Next slide. A couple years ago, we learned about a tool from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau called Your Money, Your Goals. And we had done a training a few years ago where we took some of the major parts out of that training, and we did our own little training. They offer all of those on YouTube. You can go and they actually have each chapter is a section as a YouTube video if you want to just learn about certain sections. It actually has really good information about bank accounts and loans and credit cards. And it's a great resource for yourself, but especially for your clients, if you have somebody that needs to file a complaint against a financial product or financial service, there's steps online to file a complaint. They also have an 800 number that you can call and talk to someone, and they will help you file a complaint over the phone. They have lots of toolkits and booklets and worksheets, brochures. Some of them you can print from their website. You can also request copies and they will send them to you free. They have a pamphlet that's just designed just for people with disabilities. They have lots of little tips and tools on saving money, credit reports, taxes, bills, and fraud, scams, lots of different things. So if you have a chance, take a look at that site as well. And they also have it in multiple languages. So that's another thing. Next page, please. So when your tenant training gets scheduled, typically when we schedule our tenant trainings with the clients that we do the training for, we send them out a little packet. And in that packet is this double-sided document that has tips for being a successful renter. And just to give everybody an idea, or to give the individual that we're doing tenant training for an idea of what tenant training is. And so it's going to be things like going over the lease and going over utilities and bills and, applying for energy assistance and what to do in an emergency. And what if that emergency is, losing your keys and the different things. Lots of stuff about going over the community rules. Just to let you guys know, Penny Scrivens is going to do another part of this training where she goes way into detail about the lease and the community rules. So stay tuned. That's another one of the days of training that you'll get all of that information. Every make sure if you're there with your client when they sign their lease, but if you're not and you're visiting, a couple days later, make sure that they signed an 811 lease. There is a specific lease for this program. It's not, I have a copy I'm going to show you in a minute. It's not always going to look like that because properties can download that lease into their computer software. So it may look a little bit different, but we just want to have you have an idea of what it looks like. One of the other things that we always want to make sure is that there is the 811 lease addendum, and that's a medical leave addendum, which covers the tenant to be out of the unit for 180 days for a medical reason before the unit is considered abandoned. So make sure that they have that signed in their packet. Tenants are still responsible for paying their portion of rent and paying their utilities, but the property can't take the unit away from the person. They still have it for 180 days. Now, if it's, 190 days or something like that, I mean, it's not a hard 180 days. There's circumstances, people leaving for whatever the medical reason is. It could be a little bit longer. So we're not in the business of creating homelessness, and we're willing to work with people as long as they update the property and let them know the things that are going on. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to go over a little bit more detail about utilities and the utility allowance and how that's calculated. Then there's a section, like I said, later in the training where they go over lost keys. And if anybody's ever helped a client sign a lease, that there's community rules. There's most of these that are listed here, if you can see those are pretty common. No smoking. We have yet to deal with a property that has allowed smoking. Most of the properties have different rules related to pets. Most definitely, overnight visitors is typically a 14 night per year. It's not per month. It's not per 6 months. It's for the whole entire year. Now, there are different things that could, different circumstances. Sorry about that. There are different circumstances. If someone is sick, someone has guests, family in from town. My suggestion is to always talk to the property manager, kind of give them a heads up so that it doesn't become an issue, and just to let them know what's happening and why you have somebody staying. Quiet hours. This has been coming up a little bit here recently. So just to make sure there are quiet hours for properties, and it's typically around 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So even though those are very specific time frames, even at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you can't be blaring your music so that everybody else in the apartment building hears it. So yes, there are specific quiet hours, but you also have to be respectful of your neighbors and not having them do anything that you wouldn't want done to you. Most properties have a no satellite dish. Maintenance, there's maintenance issues, how to report a maintenance issue. Most of the time it's online portals that are being used these days where you can put that in, but there's always a phone call or a phone number that you can call. Smoke detectors are maintained by the property. So that's something that has to be done on that side. If there's an issue, contact maintenance. Pest control. Pest control typically for most of the properties is done every 3 months, but tenants can always call in early if they see, some extra signs of pest that need to be addressed. You can call in early and they will usually put you on the schedule to have something done sooner rather than later. Appliances. If there's something going on with the refrigerator, the dishwasher, the microwave, contacting the maintenance or the property manager to say, hey, what's going on? Can somebody come check this out? In the very beginning, when we started with 811, we were kind of encouraging folks to use like command strips, those 3M command strips. That's a no-no. Make sure their properties are okay, usually with like little nail holes or picture hanger holes. but always check with the property or check with the community rules to see what their role is around hanging things and making changes to your apartment. Chelsea had talked about another section later on about reasonable accommodations, and that's going to be done later on as another training, but there's always paperwork for the property to apply for.
I'm going to hop in here, Christina, as well, while you're on mute, but
sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so reasonable accommodations and modifications, that's going to be a whole separate training, but yeah, typically the properties want to see a letter. I mean, that's very standard. You know, obviously these can be verbally requested, but a paper trail is going to be the best thing that you can possibly do with the person you're working with, because, you know, what if, how about like a situation where a property manager changes? You have like one person and they're in the position and then a new person comes in. You want to make sure that you're keeping track of when the request was submitted and also what the outcome was. Another thing I want to really drive home is renter's insurance, although not required for most situations, although more properties are requiring it, wanting individuals to come in with renter's insurance. That is an essential thing. I highly, highly recommend talking with the person you're working with about getting renter's insurance. It's low cost typically. You have a monthly payment for it, and it protects your belongings if there's a fire or flood or anything like that. I've had many people contact me thinking that essentially the property is responsible for covering the loss of your belongings, but that's not the case. That's why having renter's insurance is so important. And if you're a renter yourself, I encourage you to have it as well. So it's really, really helpful, especially for somebody who's really low income, who replacing those things is a lot of money. So they can submit a claim and then get, you know, a check to be able to replace some of those things.
And I would also add in there that it's not even just about replacing your items, but I would tell you, and we do a separate training on renter's insurance if anyone's interested in. I know, Chelsea, you had mentioned about sending out the link to sign up for those other trainings. One of the things that I think is important to mention about renter's insurance is you could have a couple of people over in your house and someone falls in your kitchen. And if they sue you, you know, which they can, I mean, if they get hurt in your home, you know, they can sue you. But if you have renter's insurance, it covers things like that. It would cover if someone was hurt in your home, you know, covering you as well as covering that person, so that it's not a personal thing. Again, like Chelsea said, it's not mandatory. You don't have to. Some properties offer a discount. We've seen a couple properties that offer a discount for for your security deposit. So if you sign up with the company that has renter's insurance that they're offering, they may give you a discount in your security deposit that time. Just make sure that there's Maryland Insurance Administration. There's a separate website that monitors all of those, all of the companies. So, you know, take a look at that. I think we have a link somewhere we can send out. We can send out this form, this flyer, if you guys are interested, if you want to share it with your clients when you go to do tenant training, to kind of let them know, you know, what things are there, what's in the training that's going to be done, and why it's important. But I really do want to stress Chelsea's point about documentation. So while reasonable accommodations and modifications don't have to be in writing, when it's not in writing, you don't have a paper trail. So, you know, make copies. If you can fax it or send an email with a red receipt, some type of electronic communication, I would always recommend, just so that, you know, somebody received it, somebody has it, you know, when it was sent. And then there is usually paperwork from the property that the property management company has related to that accommodation or modification that needs to be filled out, typically by a healthcare provider. So they should be able to give you that document, that paperwork, so that you can work on that. Just real quick to go over accommodations and modifications. So an accommodation is a change to the rule that would assist the person with a disability to be able to enjoy their apartment, and their community, just like anyone else in the property. Reasonable modifications is a change to the structure, or it could be grab bars or ramps or lever door handles, things like that. Again, that's going to make the unit so that the person can enjoy their home just like everyone else in the community. So talk to your community manager, your property manager, or your case manager if you think that there's a accommodation or modification. But did you say that's on the 15th? The 15th is 10th?
Yeah, that one is on the 10th.
On the 10th.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that one on the 10th, because Disability Rights Maryland does a really nice job with reasonable accommodations and modifications. And then there's a really brief section on here about, getting along. We talked about renters insurance already, but getting along, and it's, it's a good, it's really important to have a good relationship with your property manager. It's good to get along with your neighbors. Sometimes clashes, but that's, sometimes where a case manager might come in and have to be that go-between. If an individual is interested in moving out, typically it's 2 months. There are certain circumstances where a property management company will allow for 30 days, but it's typically 60. But I would still tell somebody to reach out to the property manager and double check the lease and make sure the time frame, so you don't get charged for something. You're still going to be responsible for your portion of the rent until you move out. And that person needs to empty out the apartment of all of the belongings. And so for anybody that's a support planner, I kind of just want to give you a heads up as far as like durable medical equipment and returning things like hospital beds and stuff like that, because sometimes that becomes a little bit of an issue, or at least for us, I feel like it's a little gray area of who's responsible for moving that out. Is it the family? Is it the company that brought the equipment? Are they going to come pick it up? Things like that. So just to kind of give you something to think about, should that happen if somebody has to move out. Next slide, please. I also have these emergency contact list documents. I'm happy to send them out to you. I know with technology the way it is, everything's in our phone, everything's in an email. Maybe there's an app, but sometimes it's nice just to have a piece of paper on your refrigerator, at the front door, on your front door, that has this information. Because if something happens where say your client's in their home and the property manager stops by or maintenance stops by, and if there's something here that they can see quickly that has that information, and it what if your phone stops working or an app stops working, or you have to borrow somebody else's phone and you can't get to that information. So just having something tangible sometimes is nice, just to have something available. So again, happy to send those out to you guys if you would like a copy. Next slide. Just another example, just a couple different ones that they had. So throughout our trainings, we've picked up on some information here and there. The Office of Home Energy Programs, which is through the Department of Human Services, has 3 separate grant programs. That's one of those, probably the most that we've all heard of, is the Maryland Energy Assistance Program, MEAP. It helps with paying bills for heating bills, fuel suppliers, utility companies for the customer, things like that. There's an application online you can help your client fill out, or print, and your client can fill out on their own. There's the Electric Universal Service Program, which is financial assistance with electric bills, and eligible customers receive help that'll pay a portion of their current electric bill. Budget billing is a tool that utility companies provide to help spread out the annual utility bill over several months. And that's another program that we encourage individuals to sign up for. We know that you can't sign up for that as soon as an individual gets into the unit. I think you have to be there for 3 months before you can complete that application, but again, recommend it. And there's also an arrearage retirement assistance, which helps customers with large past due electric and gas bills. And if the customer is eligible, they're going to receive a grant up to $2,000 towards paying that past due amount. Customers must have a past due bill of $300 or greater to be considered eligible. And then there is the Office of People's Counsel. You can actually sign up for to get on their email list, and they will send you this information. And they do also do some trainings as well. And so they represent Maryland residential customers before the Public Service Commission and other federal agencies, and provide assistance with dealing utility issues. I've seen things come through with, internet and rent and security deposits. So they do cover a pretty big area. So again, you can email them and they will put you on their list server. Typically, if you belong to our case management, our peer-to-peer case management group, any of the ones that Chelsea and I get from the Office of People's Counsel, we usually send email out to everybody. So if you're not on their list, you'll get the information from us. So I'll kind of just give that shout out too. If you're interested in attending our peer-to-peer case management training or work group, let us know. We'll put you on that email invite, and we'll send that. We'll include you in that, and you can join. Next slide, please. I know this was one of the questions early on where we were talking about some of the things that your client might ask you to go over while you're doing tenant training. Usually you can find resources online, just Googling about transportation in the specific area that person is in. Most of us probably know in, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, you're always going to have MTA with probably the most routes available through Baltimore County and Baltimore City. In Prince George's and Montgomery, they have, I can see the bus, and now I'm completely blanking on the name of their metro. I'm blanking on the name of their transportation, but all of those things can be
Metro
found
and
Metro
the bus.
Yeah. I know.
The bus.
There's also the separate Metro, and then the light rail and MARC train, paratransit options like MTA Mobility. That's more of a fixed route. But again, there's an application process for that you can help individuals apply for. They have an interview. Minibuses, and I mean, now this is probably more new to us. Well, not so new, but Uber and Lyft and ride sharing, different things like that. Medicaid used to do, I think they still do. I wish MDH, somebody from MDH was on here, but they used to have taxi vouchers. I don't know if they still do that, but Medicaid does offer some transportation assistance for Medicaid recipients going to different programs or medical appointments and things like that. There are volunteer services in some of the counties where there's a team of people that'll help drive individuals, once you schedule it. Dial-A-Ride is a shared curb-to-curb transportation service for individuals 65 and older. Again, this is not an inclusive list. I feel like as social media and the world, I mean, who knew about Uber and Lyft? Who would have thought that would become something as big as it is? But just Google the area that the person is in, and typically that county or that jurisdiction will have their own website about different transportation services that are available in that area to individuals with disabilities and just individuals in general in that area. Next slide, please. Understanding a lease. Just want to make sure that everybody knows that a lease is a contract. That contract is signed between the property owner and the tenant. It gives the tenant the right to live in the property with certain rules. Keep a copy of the lease. Please, please, please get a copy of the lease. Most Most programs should have a walkthrough before you even sign that lease. We strongly encourage to make sure that your tenants do that move-in inspection form. Please don't let your client sign a lease without having that inspection done. Take pictures of things. You know, it's has happened before where, you know, contractors are in the building doing last minute things, and, you know, maybe they carry something in and they chip the countertop. You know, somebody goes in, there's, you know, your client goes in, starts to move in, and they see that chip. You know, your client doesn't want to be held responsible for, you know, that on the countertop. So please make sure that they do the move-in inspection before they sign that lease. It's very, very important. Sometimes property managers will try to gloss over that inspection form and just get you to sign the lease and hurry up and get through it. But I just tell them to ask, you know, I want to look at the unit before I sign my lease. Make sure that that lease has very basic information: the name of the property owner, the property management company, the tenant's name and the new address, how long the lease is, who's on the lease and who's going to be living in the unit, the rent, the security deposit. Now, it will have, most leases will have something in there about late charges and the dates that they're due. Just kind of a heads up, even though this will be reviewed later on. There are no late fees for the Section 811 program. So make sure if your tenant comes back and says, you know, I got a late fee, go to the property manager, let them know there's no fees. You know, if there's an issue, you can always send them back to myself or Chelsea. We'll help with that, but there are no late fees. And then the rest of the lease is going to go over the responsibilities of the tenant and the owner. Very legalese of, you know, the wording, much stronger than just the community rules, but it will go over those responsibilities and timeframes. And that's where it will say, you know, how long you have to give your move out notice, or why a landlord or why the property management company can decide not to renew a lease, or, you know, community rules are broken and lease violations and things like that. So I can guarantee that the property manager is not going to sit there and read all 11 pages. So if you want to give your client a copy of the lease before they go to the lease signing, so that they kind of have a heads up of what it's going to look like, I would encourage you to do that. We can send out the link to the full lease, so that they have an idea of what they're signing and what it's going to say. And that's not a problem to send out to everybody. Next slide. This is just the first page of what the 811 lease looks like from HUD. There's the link for the actual 10-page lease. It will be updated soon. So if you have an older lease, you know, keep checking. Once we update it, we'll send out an email and let everybody know that it's been updated. But this is basically what the lease will look like, and making sure all of those sections in there that are listed A, B, C, D, and so on are all filled in with the correct information. Next slide. This is a sample of the Community Choice Homes lease. Looks just a little bit different, basic information again, but this will look different than the 811 lease, and make sure that your client has something that looks like this. We don't have a copy of the Weinberg lease. Typically, that's what the property uses for all of their other tenants. So that won't look any different than anything else. So 811 and Community Choice Homes have different leases. So just kind of be on the lookout for those. Next slide. Community rules or house rules, property rules, they're going to be provided by the management company the day that they sign a lease. We've seen some properties give out folders, which is nice, because then you have a copy of the lease. There's a copy of the community rules. It could have information in there about the laundry room or the mail room, or information about the computer lab or the exercise room. It should also have information about how to make the payment, the rent payment, whether they take money orders or is there an online portal. And I'm just kind of going to give this as a new note because I feel like it's coming up more often here. Yes, properties are charging charging a fee to use an online portal, which isn't uncommon. If anybody's paid their BG&E bill on BG&E's website, there's usually a convenience fee. Most of them will spell out the amount that it is, but we've had some problems with some of the properties. So kind of just look up, make sure if there's a flyer in there. There should be a flyer in there so that the people know where to go to make that payment. Just look at that information. There should be information about how to let the property know that there's a maintenance issue and what's considered an emergency maintenance issue versus, the toilet in my bathroom is overflowing and I can't turn off the water. That's an emergency. But, the towel bar in my bathroom, the one side fell down. Not an emergency issue, but, just making sure that they know the difference between what is a maintenance emergency, what actually falls under maintenance. Honestly, you would be surprised the number of people that call maintenance and say they need paper towels. That's not a maintenance issue. That's not a maintenance responsibility. And there should also be a section in there about the cleaning and apartment upkeep. And yes, I am going to tell you, again, give your clients a heads up that they do inspections periodically, and it's not to get in. And usually what happens is they come in and they will check the hot water heater. They will check the washer and dryer if there's one in there. They'll check the air conditioning, or the vents, maybe change an air filter or something like that. And so when they're in there looking at those other things, they are going to look at the rest of the apartment. And yearly, HUD does their own inspection at the property. And so they'll be in there again, looking at things and seeing. So it's not really a surprise if, the property says to someone, you need to do a better job at housekeeping and things like that, because all of those housekeeping issues then lead into pest control and things like that. So, one can snowball and create another issue. So just making sure that they understand those things. And again, in those community rules, there's going to be things about the smoking policy. And again, there's no smoking at these properties, but they will typically let you know where you can go off of the property or where the parameters are of where, smoking is allowed. It will go over your overnight guest policies, quiet hours. We didn't talk about rent escrow. So if for some reason there is an issue, so let's say something happens where there's water being brought into the unit at a window, and the property has come through a couple times to try to repair it. They've called another outside contractor to come and look at the window, and there's still water coming in. If there is an issue that you feel the property is not handling, individuals can file so that the rent that still has to be paid. So just because there is a maintenance issue or something that you don't like, it doesn't mean that someone can stop paying the rent. They have to continue paying the rent, but they have to go to court and it has to go into a rent escrow. And there are steps that need to go around that. There are lease violations, and those rules will talk about those lease violations and the eviction process. And they will also talk about utilities, the utility provider. It may even go over the utility allowance and things like that. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so as Chelsea had mentioned very early on when she started her presentation, individuals for the Section 811 program pay 30% of their total household income for rent and a portion of the utilities. I'm very visual, so that's why my slide has this little box over here to the left. And this is a very very quick math example, because there are things that could reduce the monthly income. So there could be things like medicine or durable medical equipment, things that someone pays out of pocket for medical supplies. That could be a reduction in their total household income, and those receipts should be supplied to the property so that they can recalculate the rent. But we're just going to do a very basic, Grace gets 730 in SSI. 30% of her total income is $235. The utility allowance, which is calculated actually by HUD and by the use of all of the utilities that's used throughout the apartment complex, and they go by square footage and things like that. So you will see you may see for like a 1-bedroom property, it would be $75, but maybe for a 2-bedroom, it could be, 105. So it will go up the bigger the unit is in square foot. But so if the utility allowance is 75, we're going to take, so 30% of the income, which is 235, minus the utility allowance is $160. So $160, the best way I think the easiest way I can explain this is at the beginning of the month when Grace gets her SSI, she takes $235 right off the top and puts that to the side. She's going to take $160 out of that $235, and that's going to go right to the property to pay her rent. She's going to hold on to that $75 for her utility bill. When the utility bill comes in, she's going to make that payment. So if it's a little bit cooler and she hasn't been running the air conditioner so much and her bill comes in and it's $60, she does not owe that $15 to anyone. She doesn't owe it back to the program. It doesn't go to her rent. She gets that $15 to put in her pocket. She pays the $60. But if it's a little bit colder and she's been running the heat a little bit more and her bill comes in and it's $90, she has to go back into her budget and find that extra $15 and add it and pay that bill. So I know that that's a really quick, dirty example of it, but hopefully it kind of makes sense. And all of that should be spelled out in the lease. All of this information should be there as far as her income, her utility allowance, and her monthly rent. The security deposit is typically going to be what is called the total tenant rent. And that's the combination of the utility allowance and the 30% of her income. So if you want to know what the security deposit could possibly be, it's usually whatever that 30% and that's usually the total tenant rent payment. Next slide, please. Oh, and that's Chelsea and I, our contact information. If you have questions that were not talked about here, or you just need to talk to us about something, this is our contact information. Chelsea, did you want to open the floor up to questions?
Yes, I also wanted to mention too that all of the people who've registered, you should be receiving supplementary documents from us. So a copy of the PowerPoint, emergency, if you would like to get a copy of the emergency contact sheets, we can send those out. We can also send out copies of the 811 lease. We'll likely just include a link to the DHCD website because that has all of the 811 documents on there, the more updated documents. And we also, just as an FYI, there will be an updated tenant selection plan for 811 posted on the DHCD website. So that's one to keep, make sure you bookmark that page because you can look at any of the updated documents and notices on there. And everyone should be receiving a survey. You must complete that survey. It has some assessment questions from today's session. It should be automatically sent through Zoom. So you'll see it listed as a survey. It's actually more of an assessment. Make sure you do it. If you don't do it, then I can't give you credit for today's session. So I need you to complete that. You can always view the recording if you came in a little bit late, and that'll help you with answering the questions. Anyone have questions though for myself and Christina? Feel free to If you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you.
Oh, one thing I just wanted to say before people start with questions. If you guys don't have access to the online registry that we used to add applications to the wait list, email me, let me know. We have changed the process from how we first started, where we're asking everyone to sign a case manager agreement form that you're agreeing that you're going to be able to do the tasks that we're looking for adding your clients onto the wait list. So we can send you that to get you an account started. But yeah, just send me an email if you don't have access to the wait list, and we'll get you started with that.
Anyone else have any questions? And you can always send us an email after the fact if something comes up, you know, you're reviewing this content, you're like, oh man, I forgot to ask that question. Just shoot us an email.
I think was it Daniel? The question moved up really quick, or some other people started typing in. Is there a window for scheduling shadowing? No, I would say that there's really no window, only because. So for right now, we are not in the process of leasing up any units for 811. We probably won't have our next set of units until maybe June, maybe July. So if you were to happen to have a client, you know, getting ready to lease up, it wouldn't be until then. But if you have a client that doesn't get housed until, you know, a year from now, I mean, it could be then. If you have somebody outside of the 811 or Weinberg program and you want us to, you know, to join you for that, you know, we're happy to do that. But you know, we're kind of trying to figure out how we're going to get everybody trained, or to do that shadowing when, you know, when there's not really a lot going on right now with 811 and housing.
Yeah, and it's really honestly a case-by-case basis. Like Christina mentioned, you know, if you have a person that you're working with, say they're in the DDA rent subsidy program, they're, you know, leasing up their apartment, that's, you know, we can do shadowing for that. Like that's the, you know, that's the whole point of this training. But what happens is after you've completed all of these sessions, you've done all of the assessments, you know, we're going to have your information. And as soon as you have a person leasing up, we will know and we'll say, hey, you know, this is a new person leasing up. Do you want this to be your shadowing? So we can do that. That's, you know, certainly not an issue. Someone asked, is the utility allowance available to Weinberg tenants? And the answer is yes. I mean, that's going to apply to both 811 and Weinberg. And then is there a way to get a training for a group on the 811 program and how to get clients onto that wait list? So just something to keep in mind, we're a 2-person team at MDOT. I highly encourage you to again, get signed up for the constant contact list. Let me actually unshare my screen here because it's a little bit harder for me to, I will put in that link, like I mentioned, in the chat so you guys can get registered for it. We do these trainings fairly often. We try to do them as often as we can. So I encourage anyone who is not registered for this upcoming training notice list. I'm going to put this in the chat, guys, so take a look at it. Okay, doing it right now. So that is the link that allows you to get registered for our list. So please take a look at that. And if you're not signed up, go ahead and do that now. We offer this, like I said, fairly regularly. So we also do have all of our trainings recorded. So if people want to view the recording, they can do that as well. Okay, and then I had another question in the chat. It looks like somebody asked, okay, is there a time for Cecil County to start participating in these programs? If you're referring to MFP Bridge, the thing to understand with that is that's a partnership with the housing authorities. So they would have had to opt it in and said, we want to offer a certain number of housing choice vouchers to MFP Bridge recipients, and that has not happened. So, you know, if that's your specific question, I assume that it is, because that's a county by county type thing. That's just currently where we're at with that. We cannot force them to participate, unfortunately, but you know, that's just kind of where things stand. It doesn't mean that we could get units in Cecil County in the future through, you know, 811 or Weinberg if there's low-income housing tax credit properties there. That's something to keep in mind. Can we do the shadowing if we have a person that is about to sign a lease to downsize to a more affordable apartment, but they have not received a voucher yet? I mean, I assume that's through an affordable program. Is that, who's asking that? Tiara? If you want to ask that question, or if you want to respond to me in the chat, if it's for another subsidized program, then yes. I mean, you know, like, as I mentioned previously, if it's within the portfolio of programs that we just talked about previously. So, I mean, this training, just to clarify, Tiara, and for anyone else who's attending this, I went through all of the housing programs that MPAW is involved in. This training is going to apply to those programs. So it wouldn't really make sense for you to do shadowing if it's like a market rate apartment program, because it's not even going to be the same thing. They're very different. You know, like leases look different, requirements are different. It won't be beneficial for your client or for us to be involved in that because it's just completely different, not the same type of programs. Is there already a date for shadowing? We don't have dates established yet. As long as you attend, like I said, all of these sessions, complete all of the surveys, we're going to have a list of individuals who've done that. Zoom will automatically generate that. And what we're going to do is, once we have that list and you have a client who's, you know, say up for a housing opportunity in the future, then we're going to do essentially a process where we shadow you as you're helping that person with leasing up. Once you finish doing the shadowing process, that's when you get the certificate. We don't issue certificates before that point in time because, you know, we have many people, and, you know, unfortunately, because of the waitlist demand, we have individuals who remain on our waitlist for a long period of time and might not get a housing opportunity immediately. So, you know, as a case manager, obviously, you're still working with the person to identify other housing opportunities or get on as many wait lists as possible. But the point in time in which we do shadowing is at that point in time when you're helping the person with moving in. It just makes more sense that way because you get a good review of the content. You get to talk to the person, and we can, you know, coach you through that process. All right, do we have any other questions? And, you know, if anyone has questions about, like I mentioned, the programs that, you know, we talked about today, feel free to send us an email. We're happy to help with clarifying information that wasn't, you know, immediately clear in this session. Again, as I mentioned, please sign up for that mailing list that I provided the link to. Our next session is going to be on Monday. That is May 8th. It's Understanding a Lease and Community Rules. Christina and Penny Scrivens will be presenting. It's from 10 to 11:30. Let me see if I can go ahead and get the link for you guys if you're not already registered for that. I want to make sure everybody has it. And again, if you have any questions in the meantime, just please let us know. Here is the registration link, everybody, for those of you who did not register quite yet for the next session. Where's my chat? Takes away the chat when okay, and Christina just put information on the peer-to-peer case management call. So just sent her an email at the housinginfo.mdod@maryland.gov. Oh, here we go, my bad. Here is a link to register for the next session in this series, guys. So if for some reason you don't get the survey after, just let me know. This is a new process for me using this Zoom survey. So, you know, just send me an email if for some reason you don't receive it. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for attending our first session. Again, looking forward to seeing everyone next Monday, the 8th, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks, everybody. Take care.